I got to a point of learning silence, so I have to unlearn it.
Hmm.
So how do I help him not learn silence and also not be silenced by
Right.
other people so that he can tread a different path? Hi, I'm Elaine Lynn Herring, author of Unlearning Silence, and today I'm visiting with my friend Dr. Michelle Deering on mother-daughter connections.
Welcome to Mother Daughter Connections, the show dedicated to educating, encouraging, and equipping moms to build lasting, meaningful connections with their daughters. I'm your host and mother daughter relationship personal trainer, Dr. Michelle Deering. My heart is to be of help to you. I believe that your relationship with your mom is the foundation for your future success, personally, parentally, and professionally. Now remember, even though I'm a licensed psychologist, I'm not your shrink on this show. I am, however, here to share my opinions and those of my guests. If you have concerns about your mental health, please seek services from a mental health provider in your local area. Now join me as we pause to consider today's topic. Well, hi there and welcome. I am so excited to have my new friend Elaine Lynn Herring here with us today. Elaine is a facilitator, writer, and speaker. She works with organizations and individuals to build skills in communication, collaboration, and conflict management. She has facilitated executive education at Ivy League and top-tier colleges. She is the former advanced training director for the Harvard Mediation Program and a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. Elaine has worked with coal miners, microfinance organizers, mental health professionals, and senior leadership at major corporations like Google, Nike, and the Red Cross. Her research interests include unlearning silence, speaking up, and how race, gender, and non-apparent identities influence negotiation. Elaine has her bachelor's in arts in political science and music from the University of California in Berkeley and a JD from Harvard Law School. Elaine is not only a wife and mom of a son, but she is also the author of the USA Today best-selling book, Unlearning Silence: How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. Well, I am full and my heart is full. Elaine, I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I uh have like given folks a little bit of a heads up about your background and stuff, but that's all the formal stuff. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about you and like what you've been up to recently?
I It's funny that I have to go here, but I'll go here.
Uh, but okay, go. I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm a human being, which is sort of a strange place and strange way to introduce yourself
Mm,
to people, but it is the way that I have found myself doing it. Because when we have data points about people based on the things that we can see or that we hear, we so often make assumptions about who they are
mhm.
and how we might engage or not engage with them. And that is human nature to draw conclusions. And when people hear that I have taught at Harvard Law School or that I've worked on 6 continents or wrote a best-selling book, there's an assumption of, oh my gosh, who is this person and what do I think about them? I can feel your judgments already. Or we used to call it the H bomb. Like you drop Harvard in a conversation and people immediately think and feel differently about you. And I'm like, I, I, I'm just a person. I am very much a work in progress.
Mhm,
I am very much on my own trajectory of unlearning silence.
mhm.
I am trying to figure out that I make sure that I communicated with carpool who's picking up my kid today,
Right.
which does not diminish the work that I have done or the expertise that I have or the gifts that I have honed and hope to use in the world.
Mhm.
But it takes me back to I am a human being doing my best. I believe you are a human being
Yes.
doing your best, and our listeners are too. And
Mhm.
so, can we be human together?
Oh, I'm so glad that you said that because yes, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And I am like, did I text carpool? I'll check that after our conversation.
Right, right. Oh, totally. I totally hear you on that. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm like in different social circles and I'm in a new social circle now and went out with a young lady who's younger than I am. And when we sat down to just eat our lunch,
Mm,
she just started, it's like, so how's your week been? And then we just ended up going into everything. And somewhere around out of like maybe the hour and 15 minutes we spent with each other, somewhere around like the 50-minute, 50
mm,
mark,
mm.
she said something and I was like, "Oh yeah, I actually don't know what you do." And she's like, "I don't know what you do."
Yeah.
And she's like, and she's like, and she said to me, and this is like a quote, purposefully don't ask people
Yeah.
that when I meet them. And I said to her, that is so, and
Yes.
put in the explicative, refreshing. So I hear you on that.
Um, be and there's so much to that. I don't ask people, "What do you do?"
Mhm,
I often will ask people, "What's your story?"
mm,
Or, "What does life look like for you right now?"
mhm,
Because, for me, having we're just more than the work that we do. We are more than the titles that we hold, the organizations that we may or may not be affiliated with.
mhm,
And so I love that for 55 precious minutes, you were able to not talk about it, not because our work or the things we do aren't important, but
mhm.
to really put them, I think, in proper place.
Yes,
One of
yes.
my pet peeves right now is,
Mhm,
anytime you sign up for a conference or register for something, you
mhm.
need your name.
Yep.
Okay, I can mostly do that. Then there's like what title and what organization
Mhm,
are you affiliated with?
mm,
And if you are in transition or you are somewhere in your evolution
mhm.
where you don't have that title and organization, it's really hard. The
Mm.
world feels set up to put us in those boxes,
Boxes, yes. Mhm. Yep.
and we're just more complicated than boxes, and life is more complicated and nuanced than boxes.
Exactly, exactly. So let's be outside the box. There are no boxes here today.
Mm,
But one of the things that
never mind that we're
I'm
on Zoom and we're clearly in a box.
boxes, right? That is so deep. We could go into that and be on a whole nother. Yeah, exactly. What fits into this frame? No, we're just gonna we're
Put
gonna
it in
go there.
text.
And I hear you on being interested in people's stories and I got introduced to you through one of my friends and someone I consider a dear mentor of mine, Jeff Brown, on his podcast, Read to Lead. Um and when I went to your that when I heard that interview, I was sort of like, ooh, so refreshing. And then and then when I went to the author event, it was like you were probably halfway through your answer to the first question that someone asked, and I thought to myself, "Oh, I could have such a real conversation with you." So, that's why I'm really glad that you're here. One
I'm
of the
glad to be here.
hazards of hanging around someone and actually I was this way before any title, any position, anything like this. You know, people, you know, I just like to know about people and their
Yeah.
life journey, and so for me, I'm kinda curious as to what life was like for you, you know, growing up, because
Mhm.
who we are now
Mm,
is informed by
mhm.
all that stuff, so I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I am the youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Taiwan to the United States. And I share those facts
Mhm.
because they shape who we are.
Right.
What that means is, as the youngest in this family, I was supposed to be quiet. I was supposed to be respectful. And respect means not having an opinion, not asking questions, like
Mhm.
do the dutiful daughter thing.
Mhm.
And daughter in comparison to son, in many Asian cultures, sons were more prized. If you had a farm and lineage went with the son, than to have people to work on your farm and take care of you in old age, you needed sons. And
Right.
so sons were more prized than daughters. We don't live in that same context anymore, but the threads of patriarchy and of who we value run really deep.
Mm,
Even if, and I would say my parents did this, my mom really wanted to make sure that I was equally valued and felt that. And certainly they worked hard
mhm.
to make sure that I had the same opportunities as my brother. And I was also watching her. She was told to stay at home and raise the kids because
Oh,
that's what wives did
okay,
in
okay,
that generation. And so
okay.
she was very adamant that I would have a career or at least the opportunity to work outside of the house if I wanted to.
Mhm,
So all of that forms where we are today, who I am today.
mhm, mhm. So, in terms of so it sounds like you got a lot of that silence message, dutiful
Mhm,
daughter, as you put it. I love that you said it that way,
mhm,
from your mom.
mm.
Um, what was the relationship like between your mom and dad? Was he on board with her approach to you or
Oh, I would say
yeah,
it came from both of them, but
both of them?
because she
Okay.
was doing the child rearing and raising, it
Mhm.
came from her.
Okay.
But she was doing the child rearing and raising because he said she should do it.
There you go.
Thank you, patriarchy.
Right, right. No, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. It's funny because our daughters now, our twin daughters are 23, and I remember as they were going through college and they're learning more stuff than what we had taught them,
Mhm.
they'd come home from college during break and it's just like, "The patriarchy this and the patriarchy that." And I'm like, "Oh boy."
Which isn't even asking, one of my proudest moments of this year
Uh-huh.
happened maybe a month and a half ago.
Mm.
And I was talking with my mom, and she used the phrase patriarchy,
Oh,
which is not, I had never heard her use it
right.
before. And it is such an example of how we're all on our own journey,
Mm, mhm,
right? And we're all living against the backdrop of whatever family, culture, context, point in time
mm,
we are in.
mhm,
Because it's not like my mom would be very clear, if she were to go back and do it again, that was not the role she would have chosen for herself,
mm,
right? So
right,
she's playing a role within a context,
right,
communicating roles.
right.
We're all and so how much are we absorbing the messages that the context sends us in those
Mhm,
boxes?
mhm,
How much do we challenge them?
mhm,
How much do we believe we have agency in the midst
mhm,
of it, which
mhm,
changes based
mhm.
on age, based on whose roof you're living under,
Yes.
based on how much friction there might be, of how much you might push back or push boundaries.
Mhm,
And immigrating to the States, there was a lot of my parents have sacrificed a lot. And so my job is to make good on the sacrifices that they made to show up well,
okay.
right?
And
And to
and so
honor and respect that.
and to honor and respect that. One of the things I remember reading in your book had to do with, and I might be jumping ahead of myself, but uh, was when you did your trip with your brother and the whole "I'm hungry" and how do I phrase this?
Yeah.
And so just using that as an example of how you were, I guess, indirectly trained to be quiet
Mhm.
and not voice your needs.
Mhm.
How did those messages like that kind of shape and impact how you went from like through your schooling and then from schooling into, your
Mhm.
chosen profession at that time? We'll get to the different
Mhm.
iterations of that.
Yeah. And I think back on how I learned silence, and it is the cultural context,
Mhm,
but it is also how do I make it easier for the people around me, right? Life as an immigrant, when you come to this country and do not speak the language, and there is anti Asian or Asian anti immigrant
mhm,
sentiment or reality, is not easy.
mhm,
And so I often just sort of looked at my parents and thought, oh, this is you left everything you knew.
Mm,
And how do I make good on that? How can I make your life easier?
mm,
When money was tight, right? How do I order, if we're going to go for a treat, how do I
mhm,
order from the 99-cent menu?
mm,
Because that is the least impact on you, right?
mhm,
I know that there's such good intent. I know that you're trying to build a better future for us here. I
mm,
know that that's really hard to the extent that my child brain can acknowledge that.
right.
And how do I make myself small?
Mm,
And I didn't put it together until recently, ordering from the 99-cent menu when I really wanted something that cost $5, but I knew we didn't have it, was a
mhm,
way to make myself small.
mm,
And over time, you deny the things that you might want, and you learn that it's okay, I can live. It's not necessarily sustainable, but it's that to me is how subtly we might learn silence,
mhm,
is all of those choices for potentially noble and good reasons.
mhm,
And then you're rewarded over time
right.
for, oh, you're so in Mandarin, you're so guai, you're so obedient.
Mm,
You
mhm,
make it easy for other people.
mhm,
When you're in school and you're working on a group project and you work hard and you organize and you maybe do a little bit more than everybody else and everybody still gets the same credit, people are like, oh, I want to be on your team.
right.
And that feels good.
Mm,
And you ensure that you get a good grade
right.
and you ensure that everyone else gets a good grade
Right,
too.
right, right.
And then you go into the workplace, and that makes you a great entry level hire because you're easy to work with. You don't have any needs or demands. You don't rock the boat. You get stuff done. You make everyone else look really good. And often, when you are new to a company or more junior, your
Mhm,
job is to make it easier for other people.
mhm,
How do you grow from that, though?
mhm,
And how do you break that cycle where your own worth or value or contribution isn't just about making someone else's life easier? And where is the breaking point where you realize, oh, my needs, goals, hopes, and concerns are not considered or met at all? And that
right,
does not work. And we're in this big group project. I'm doing the work and you're taking credit for it.
right, right.
And this put your head down, work hard, and you'll be recognized that my parents instilled in me is not actually how corporate America works.
Mhm.
And I hit a breaking point of, hold on, this doesn't make sense.
And actually, I was kind of wondering where that breaking point was for you because I remember reading in the book that there was a moment, but I'm
Mm,
wondering before that moment where, and I know I want you to actually share about that story, but before, were there any moments before then, before you got, or were you really just kind of writing
mm,
this uh I guess one benefit of silence
mhm,
is that it's a survival
mhm.
kind of tactic. So before that aha moment that you mentioned in the book, did you have any other smaller things happen for you before
Oh,
then,
of
or was that was
course.
oh okay.
Yeah. I mean, even talking about silence as survival, that to
Mm-hmm.
me isn't that everyone's experience? And, in saying that, I'm falling into the trap that we as human beings do,
Mm-hmm.
which is we assume that other people's experiences are like ours or other people are wired like us. Silence as survival is actually one of those moments. So one of the first times I wrote about silence, it was supposed to be a joint article with my former business partners who
Uh-huh.
were all white.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we co-authored things was to be in a Word document and do track changes and leave comments for each other.
Right.
And my colleague struck out the line of silence as survival and put a comment saying, I don't understand what silence as survival means. Are you talking about COVID?
Okay.
And I remember feeling incredibly gaslit, like, uh, isn't silence as survival just the fundamental human
Right.
condition?
Right.
So I texted my
Uh-huh.
best friend
Right, right.
being like, isn't that every immigrant experience, or at least every Asian American experience? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how is this not a thing?
Right.
And she sent back some gifts that were reassuring.
Okay.
But it was a moment, I think, for me to say, actually, the people around me who are by worldly standards very successful
Mhm.
and well regarded
Mhm.
don't know everything. They don't have a monopoly on truth.
Right.
And I played by the rules for a long time, and I benefited from
Mhm.
it in terms of experience, in terms of paycheck.
Mhm.
But there were each of those moments of, okay, I'm playing by the rules, and the rules tell me to wait my turn. And I have expectations of what partnership or colleagueship might look like.
Mhm.
And my unspoken expectations are that we would consider each other's needs, goals, hopes, and concerns. The approach to negotiation that we teach is
Mhm.
that every party to a negotiation has a set of interests.
Right.
Interests are needs, goals, hopes, and concerns. I
Right.
am a party
Yes.
in this relationship, and therefore in this negotiation. Therefore, I should have a set of those as well that should be just as valid as anyone else's.
Right.
And I was not seeing that acknowledgement. And there were a couple of instances of I did all the work behind the scenes as a good, dutiful daughter
Mm.
group teammate
Mm.
does.
Mm.
And then the CEO passed it off as their own idea. And I was like,
Uh,
huh.
or
Mm.
as my daughters would say, what?
That too. And when you start to see these patterns, you can't unsee them.
Right. Right. And so for you, that was the springboard. That was when you kind of put a new line in the ground. Is that safe to say?
I
Or
wish it were that linear.
okay, well, okay. So it was a
And I wish it were that linear because I wish I had that clarity that
mm,
said, hold on, line in the ground, line in the sand, we're not going to cross it again.
mhm,
And it wasn't for
mm.
me. And I would say that whiteness and niceness are really sneaky,
Can you
right?
elaborate?
And yeah, we can say all the right things. There's a cognitive dissonance when people say, we care about you, we
Okay.
value you, we celebrate you. And I was like, okay,
Mhm.
you're saying all the right things, and you're not taking into account my priorities. Okay, well, just wait. Like, there's a lot going on. We'll get to it. We promise. You can trust us. Okay, now it's a year.
Mm,
Now it's 2 years.
mm.
How long am I waiting for? And so I wish it were a line that said, no, I'm done here. I think that line came later, but
Later.
being lured into, I want to move through the world, extending grace and understanding and compassion to the people around me.
Mhm.
I also want to be in relationships where that is reciprocal.
Yes. Yes.
And so it took me longer to get to the clarity of there is an inconsistency here that does not work than I would have hoped.
No, I hear you. And I hear you in terms of it's not always a linear moment,
Mm, mhm.
but it's these different little pieces and increments of, okay, for lack of a better word, slight number one, slight number two.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm bleeding now. So,
right,
and
right.
at what
Oh,
point
but
do you
it's not
put the
that
tip?
bad. It's just a little blood.
Right, right, exactly. And so when you got to the point of, okay, tourniquet on, stop the bleeding. Was that the part that you mentioned in your book, or am I thinking
Which part are you thinking about in the
the
book?
where the person was taking credit for something that you had?
Oh, that was
Oh, that
just
was
like
just
paper
one.
cut.
Oh,
That's
paper
just
cut.
paper cut.
Okay, okay. Okay.
But even let me listen to that phrasing where I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it's just paper cut.
Right.
And how we rationalize that or dismiss that as we talk about this, I'm reminded of abusive personal relationships and the statistics around that. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's, it takes people 6 to 8 times
That's right.
before they actually draw that line in the sand and cut ties. And how often do we do that in workplaces?
Right.
Because there are economic realities.
Mm-hmm.
There is the optimism that I think we each want to hold on to and need to hold on to in order
Mm-hmm.
to survive in this world,
Mm-hmm.
that I might be able to change it from the inside.
Right.
What is
Right.
my responsibility to everyone who comes after me or looks like me if I leave, right? All of those calculations that so many of us have
Mm.
done. And meanwhile, what are we absorbing? At what cost?
At what cost to our internal world and how we see and view ourselves.
Which
And
has led, yeah, which has led me to I have no judgment whether you stay or you go,
Mhm.
because that is so deeply personal.
Right,
And I don't know your reality. Right?
right.
I don't know what's weighing on you. I don't know what's keeping you there. I can be a mirror to reflect. Here's what I worry about. Here's what I
Mhm,
see. Here's what's
mhm,
concerning. Here are
mhm,
some other options.
mhm,
And each of us needs to make the choice right for us. And it is not as clear cut as it might be in retrospect
mhm.
or that we might wish it to be.
Right. Which is one of the things I appreciate about your book, which I think Unlearning Silence should be like required reading, like in all spheres. It's like not just in education, not just in business, but like I know for myself as I was reading it and going through it, both visually reading it and then audibly listening to it, there were parts where I just had to pause,
Yeah.
um, and say, okay, I need to chew cut on that for
Yeah.
a week or two. And there were other parts, like I showed it to one of my daughters, and I was like, I like to write in my books. I was writing like, yeah, or I would be like, oh, I was feeling it on many different levels.
We have the Michelle annotated version in Audible too, because I love those. The what? And the ugh.
Right.
So good.
And so like when I know at one point, gosh, there's so much like we could be talking about this all, but there's so many different ways. Like I started reading another book, and that person was talking about the way in which women kind of silence themselves in different situations too. But she was coming at it from being part of the majority populace, while acknowledging that she was part of the majority
Mhm.
populace. And so I guess in your travels, and I'm specifically wanting to hone in on women
Mm,
who are moms, because we're both moms here.
mhm,
You mentioned this four-step process,
mm,
okay, to unlearning silence. That like as I was
mm,
reading the first half of your book, I was like, she's gonna get to
mm,
the how to, and then you
mhm.
get to the four-step process, which involves the cultivating awareness,
Yeah.
interrogating our voices, experimenting using your own voice, and inviting voices into the mix.
Mhm.
Where do you find that women have the hardest time
Mm.
in that process? Or at least what you've heard, from your readers and people who've been exposed to you and your book?
I'm gonna push back on that
You're gonna
framing.
put okay, sorry.
As women are not a monolith.
Okay, so push back on me. So correct me. I'm corrected. So go ahead.
I'm so glad you framed it that way because that's how so often the conversation goes,
Mm, okay,
right? Women,
okay.
go fix yourselves is one of the primary. So I genuinely love that you brought us into this conversation
Hmm.
because one of the
Mm,
the impetus,
it's the
impeti.
impetus. My Latin's coming back to me. Impetus.
Yes, Latin for purpose. One of the reasons for the book
There you go.
was actually wanting to push back on the way that this conversation has been framed.
Okay.
So often the conversation has been framed as just speak up. If you're not being heard, you're not being respected, you're not getting the authority or the power or the influence that you want or need, it's you. Speak up. And as much as I am a fan of Nike, speaking up is not a just do it
Correct.
situation.
Correct.
And that framing of women, you need to speak up. You need to be more assertive. You need to have more confidence. You need to have courage, more courage, whatever flavor of that to me is part of the puzzle
Mhm.
because there is something we as women can do. And what are the people around us doing that impacts our decision as to whether it makes sense for us
Mhm.
to share, whether
Right.
we are rewarded or penalized for it, and what is baked into the systems that we're all part of. So, unlearning silence was really a response to having given and received this advice over time of you need to speak up more and you need to do it more directly. You need to do it with 3 succinct bullet points, just the right amount of emotion, but not too much, and don't smile more, smile less, and you're
Right.
just like, "Oh my god, I can't contort myself anymore," especially because you define the goalposts and continue to change them, which
Yes.
is why I go back to agency. Unlearning silence isn't about saying everything all the time to everyone. The world is far too noisy and complex for that.
Mhm.
And chapter 3 is my favorite of when
Okay.
silence makes sense to acknowledge
Yes.
silence as survival, as necessary for self preservation and self care, and the difference between silence that is oppressive or agenic and additive is agency.
Mhm.
Do you get to choose where, when, and with whom you want to lend your voice, your gifts, your skills, your talents? Or is someone else deciding that for you? So I have a hard time with what is the biggest barrier for women because I would say
Okay.
actually that framing is the biggest barrier, that we're putting
Mhm.
it just on women
Right, 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 right. I hear
and
you.
that it impacts us. We're at different points of the life cycle,
Mhm.
right? The let me acknowledge that I have a voice. Some of us are so far down the other path of not believing, as I was, not
Mhm.
believing that we have something to add because we've spent our entire lives doing someone else's bidding.
Mm.
And motherhood, oof, motherhood is supposed to be, notice the air quotes,
Right, right,
self-sacrificial and
right.
putting your children before you. Where is that to get to shower alone? What a
Right.
novel idea.
Right.
And that is what it is to be a good mother.
Mhm.
Then where is there room for my needs, goals, hopes, and concerns in
Right.
all that? So do I even recognize that I have a voice is a place I often start. Some people are like, no, I clearly have a voice. It's just suppressed by
Right.
everything else. And so what can I do? And that's where the iteration and the invitation to reflect. Other people are like, I'm using my voice, but it's not going so well, or it's not really where I want to be. And that to me is later on in the journey. So I think we're
Mm.
all on a different point in the journey, and to acknowledge it and contextualize it as we're on a journey that is impacted profoundly by the people around us.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm one of my pet peeves with this whole motherhood selflessness thing. It's like
I love your
they
tone
they
on that,
they,
by the
they
way.
yeah, is that they lessen the self so much that we don't have a self. That's why we don't see that selfishness has its place because we at least have to have a self to begin with in order to be able to decide what we're going to give, what we're going to hold back, what we can give, what we cannot give and need to hold back. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And not just because it will make us a better mother.
Right.
Right. So often it's linked to you got to pour into your cup so that you could pour out. We
Right.
we are still human, and by
Right.
nature of being human are worthy of respect and care and love and acceptance and showers.
Right. I prefer Calgon baths. But yes, yes.
That
No, no,
too.
no, no. Would you believe
Don't let
I've
me
been
limit you.
No, 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 no. It's funny because we've been in our where we're currently living for 5 years, and this past Sunday was the 3rd time I've actually had a bath. Like taken the time, it's like, I'm going to make
Ah,
myself a bubble bath.
yes.
You
Well,
know
you
what I
gotta
mean?
like scrub the bath
Uh,
before.
the-
We can we won't get into that
We
on
won't
air.
No.
Right. I can deal with some. Oh, I guess we're getting into it. I can get into some with the shower, but if I'm going to bathe in it, there's just work. And who else is scrub? Okay.
I know, I know.
Multiple.
And if they do,
Congratulations on your bath
it was lovely.
because I'm celebrating the multiple hurdles to get there.
Oh my gosh, yes. And we're just being human, which is how we started out this whole time. Geez, I'm like laughing so much I'm crying. So yes, so thank you for one reframing that because yes, we have to keep the context. And I did like chapter 3 because I remember when I was reading all the contextual stuff, it was reminding me of like even my own journey where I'm in grad school. I'm one of two people in my cohort who look like me. And even that didn't seem to make a difference. And then in all of my classes, I'm the kind of kid I was the kind of kid who, and this is like not my claim to fame, but I actually got thrown out of Sunday school because I was asking too many questions because I had gone and read what it was I was told to read. And then it was sort of like, but what about, but what about, and then after the third, but what about, she's like, why don't you go out to the hallway, please? And,
Can we
and so,
freeze frame on that? Because that is that again, how we learn silence. You actually did the homework or the pre-work that you were
right,
asked to do.
right,
You were exhibiting curiosity,
right.
which was disruptive potentially. And also to statistically speaking, right? This was one of my favorite pieces of research.
Uh,
Kids ask an average of 125 questions a day.
mm,
Adults ask an average of 6. At what point in time do we stop getting curious and engaging because the systems and the patterns, and having been a Sunday school teacher, I'm like,
mhm.
I get why they might want to keep on track and all these things.
Right.
And what message are you sending?
Right, right,
Okay, unfreeze.
right. I'm right. So then I get to grad school and it's sort of like, I'm asking, okay, we're here for intellectual discourse, so I thought, but no, it was about teaching to the norm of whatever, even at a graduate school level,
Yeah,
teaching
yeah,
to the norm
yeah,
of what it was they wanted you to walk out and parrot.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember at one point, someone who was another African American woman in the program, but she was two cohorts ahead of me.
Mm,
She sat me down at lunch and she's like, Michelle, finish and get out. And it wasn't until she said that was when light bulbs started going on for me
mhm,
about I have to be selective about what battles I'm going to choose to
mhm,
fight
mhm,
and
mhm.
where do I place my stake, you know?
Absolutely.
And so I really appreciated chapter 3 because
Mm,
I felt like you were giving everybody a different context
mm,
so that they could one see themselves maybe
mhm,
in the scenarios and
mhm.
situations that you mention in your book, but also recognize that other people might be in similar things and to consider them and their perspective and experiences. So I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. It feels like there are so many calls to action,
Hmm.
that silence is violence, silence is um, agreement, and it can be, and can be
Hmm.
interpreted in that way.
Hmm.
And we are each differently situated. So there's a lot of dancing in chapter 3, including a sidebar of this is not a
Hmm.
pass.
Right.
This is not a pass. Let me be really, really clear.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that weight of shame or guilt of I should have spoken up, I should have changed my grad school class, I should have been able to fill in the blank is
Mhm.
weight that we do not need to be carrying. And I call it self-flagellation because it feels like that, right? No one else
Yes.
necessarily is judging us, but we are sometimes judging ourselves because we do want things to change. We want the
Hmm.
experiences to be better for the people who come after us and also for
Of course.
ourselves.
Right.
And that colleague, that fellow student who sat you
Hmm.
down and said, finish up, get out of
Yeah.
here. I see the wisdom in that, and I wish someone had said that to me because I spent so much time trying to fight from the inside and
Inside.
take us back to you were picking our battles.
Yep.
And Omkari Williams' book on microactivism,
Uh,
would say you pick two causes, and small acts consistently done over time have big impact. The reality is we can't all be fighting every battle. The
right.
energy is just too diffuse, which
Right.
doesn't mean that we're not fighting some or the ones that are worthwhile, that are consistent with our values and our priorities, and being very conscious of what impact that has for our daughters,
Hmm.
for the people watching us.
Hmm.
And yet there has to also be something left of ourselves.
Right. At the end of the day, yes.
at the end of the day.
No, I hear you. Actually, this would be a great place for us to take a pause for a minute so we can hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hi, Dr. Michelle Deering here. You ever have one of those moments in your mother-daughter relationship where you're thinking, not quite sure what to do here, or you're feeling nervous or upset about the kinds of patterns that you're having in your interactions with your daughter, or maybe you're not feeling confident about your mothering, or you just simply need some answers? You think to yourself, I'll just call my mom or my sister. And maybe you have, and it's helped, and sometimes maybe it's not. Or maybe they're just not reachable when you need them. I know what that's like in those situations, and that's why I do what I do as a mother-daughter relationship personal trainer. I draw upon my 25 plus years of professional training and personal experience helping thousands of moms worldwide and giving them definitive, research-grounded, psych-infused, tailored solutions that leave them feeling confident, informed, and equipped to address their mother-daughter relationship situations. Now, if you need help or you're just looking for answers, then schedule a quick micro solutions call with me at bit.ly/micro solutions call. That's bit.ly/micro solutions call. It's those micro solutions that add up to big changes in your relationship. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Well, welcome back. I'm here with my friend Elaine Lynn Herring, author of Unlearning Silence. Elaine, you just recently mentioned, the impact on our daughters. You're a mom of a son, and it's funny because a colleague of mine, said to me, what does a mother-daughter relationship have to do with sons? I was like, well, if they choose to be moms, they're going to be raising raising you. Um, so what has your son is young. Is he in elementary school? Is
Yeah,
that
first
okay?
grade.
First grade. Oh, first grade. Whoa,
Mm.
yay, the first grade. I remember when.
Was such a knowing response.
I remember. So like what has first off, did you always want to be a mom?
I did.
You did. Okay. Okay. And what has your motherhood journey been like for you?
Not what
So
I thought it would be. When
well,
you're
okay,
as
so
like a,
you walked right into that one. What did you
I
think it
did.
was going to
I
be and
did.
what has
Great
it
question.
been?
What did I think it was going to be? And it's one of those things that I can't quite put my finger on, whether it is wiring, whether I always wanted to be a mother. Um, I thought I had an awareness of what a responsibility that was. And I'm not sure, maybe this is true of parenthood. I certainly experience it with motherhood.
Okay.
Even if someone had told me how relentless it was, how exhausting it was, I'm not sure I could have fully understood until doing it myself.
Mm.
To be clear, I am grateful to be a mother. I love
Yes.
my son. I feel like
Yes.
we always need those caveats.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, there are lots of things I that are different. I didn't expect the sleep deprivation
Mm.
to
Hmm.
be this bad, and
Mm.
I feel like sleep shapes everything.
Yes.
If I parse this out, and I'm literally processing out loud
Uh-huh.
as
Uh-huh.
we speak, so you're getting
Uh-huh.
the raw version.
Uh-huh.
My brother and I were very quiet, very obedient kids, very
Okay.
well behaved. We were the
Okay.
model kids that everybody else pointed to and disliked because their parents said, "Why can't you be more
Be
like
like,
Elaine?" I will own that. I have
okay.
done repairing some of those relationships.
Okay.
I also figured out how to
Oh,
leverage that of,
right.
your parents are willing to let me hang out with you, let me be a safe space, right? So
There you go.
I mistakenly assumed that genes might have something to do with it, and so my kid might be more like me and my brother.
Ah.
And I think you get what you get.
Right.
And it wasn't until
Oh.
I should have done more due diligence in
Mhm.
conversation with my husband when we were dating about what he was like as a child, because I have since become privy to some stories where I thought, So the things we're seeing, I'm going to
Uh-huh.
give you and your family of origin credit for, because it did not come from my family of origin.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And how to, I think that's the biggest thing,
Mm,
of difference of your child is not going to be like you. And how do I celebrate that?
yes.
How do I
Yes.
figure out how to help you figure out who you are? What are your
Right.
strengths, your weaknesses, your uniqueness, how God created you,
Right.
and help you be you, the best version of you, rather than trying to make you into a mini me, which
Correct.
might be easier in the short term.
Right, right.
I will also say that writing a book on unlearning silence while raising a toddler
Uh,
really messes with your mind. Because
uh,
I want you to have a voice
yes.
and boundaries.
Yeah, there you go. There you
And
go.
it is 9:40 p.m. and we have been asking questions, but I want you to ask questions. I
He's
don't
on
want you to lose your curiosity.
right. He's on question 126. There you go. He's gone over his daily
So,
quota.
yes, he's above average.
Right.
We have instituted question time.
Oh,
And
okay.
question time is an activity that we do where you get to ask all your questions. And then there is bedtime, which is not question time.
Okay, right. Oh, I love that. I love that.
And I thought I entered motherhood with a healthy perspective of I think every parent messes up their child. And then as an adult, you work out what your parents weren't able to teach you or what didn't land.
Uh,
And maybe there's therapy involved and
right.
you set aside budget for that.
Right.
And I still believe that to
Uh-huh.
be true. Um, I think what I didn't expect that I would probably share with potential parents
Mhm.
is you don't know, it's like a box of chocolates. You
Right.
don't
You
know
don't know
what you're
what you
gonna
got.
and you're gonna love them anyways.
Right. Exactly. 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 That I never used to believe in the at least the genetics aspect. I'm like wiping away tears because you have me in stitches. Oh my gosh. And I'm trying to be able to see you through the screen. Um, but th there's something to be said about how they are in utero because I had, twins and literally, baby, we call baby A, baby B.
Mhm.
Baby A ended up being my eldest,
Mm,
who came out first, and she was the one who didn't move around a lot. But when
mm.
she was like displeased with something, you'd know about it. And the other one, baby B, was the one who was all over the place, miss activity. Well, that's the
Mm,
way they came out.
yeah.
And I mean, as they've grown and had other experiences, they've, developed into their own. Because one of my questions for you is what have been some of the joys and challenges? So
Mm.
if I can kind of safely maybe summarize, I hear that there's a joy and that your son is above average and asks all these questions, but there's the challenge of finding boundaries around bedtime rituals.
I think that would be, I mean, the joy is really a reframe for me, which
Okay.
is what is the mindset with which I approach this?
Mm,
If the mindset is you are not becoming the person I thought you would be, i.e., mini
mm,
me,
mm.
that is much harder and there's much more tension and friction in our relationship.
Yep.
If my mindset is how do I support and love you and discover with you who you are,
Right.
that's that's fun. I mean,
Right.
that's like surprising.
Right.
And that has been a huge piece. And I will couple that with saying, I do not wish night terrors on anyone, even
Right.
my worst enemy,
Mm-hmm.
because sleep, I mean, it's the basic things. A full night's sleep uninterrupted. He
Mm-hmm.
he did not sleep through the night until he was 3.5. And we're now back in a
Ah,
cycle
okay.
of not sleeping through the night, which
Oh,
just
okay.
messes with
Yeah. Poor
everything.
thing. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Um, I feel for you in that. On both ends, I feel for him, the poor
Yeah.
poor thing, and then I feel for you because you're trying.
Mm.
Yes, so it messes with everything. Um, So given that he's like in first grade, right? Okay,
Yes.
it brought me back to when our daughters were young and
Mm,
as it relates to unlearning silence. The
mm.
daughter who was very quiet, they're both creative in their own way, but she's my deep thinker. She's the one who will ask the question. She asked me one day. She's like, "What's under the earth?" And I remember my eyebrows furrowed,
Yes. Yes.
and I just looked at her. I was like, I just love the way you think. I was like, I don't know. Let's think about this.
Yeah.
And
What a
then we just
fabulous
started.
question and
It was
fabulous
oh
response.
my gosh, it was just like the greatest. So, but there was a point in time and again, just like your son, our daughters, you know, Mensa level dad, the whole, yeah, but so they were reading at the age of 18 months, and I'm not talking mimic the words. They actually could figure out the words and whatever. So, they get to school and we're telling the teachers, uh, they can read already. You need to really kind of keep them engaged. And there was
Mm,
one teacher in the second grade that didn't like the fact that my eldest liked to just go get books outside. And we didn't find out until months after this had been going on that she literally was browbeating our daughter to the point where her creative voice just vanished.
yep,
And I was so infuriated. And
totally.
so, because that was her way of expressing her voice. So I say that as a backdrop, because there are a whole bunch of reasons around. I mean, they
Mm,
were the two African American kids in a predominantly white school. So we
yep,
can lay that picture there.
yep.
So for you as a mom with your
Mhm.
son going through the process, what things do you find that you're doing to help him n- as much as possible at his formative years not fall into silencing himself, but unlearning it? How are you approaching that in your
Yeah,
motherhood journey with him? Yeah.
yeah. It's an ongoing daily experiment. So
Hmm.
report back in about 2 decades to see how it
Okay.
turned out.
No problem. You got a
Just
date.
longitudinally, if we're gonna be
Yes.
precise about it.
Yes. Hmm.
But the hope is really that he doesn't learn silence, right? I got to a point of learning silence, so I have to unlearn it.
Hmm.
So how do I help him not learn silence and also not be silenced by
Right.
other people so that he can tread a different path?
Hmm. Right.
Now, silence doesn't have to be synonymous. Silence and respect are not the same thing,
Correct.
right? So there
Correct.
is, how do I help him develop his voice, and
Hmm.
voice not just being the words that we say in a meeting, but how we move through the world. How do I help him figure out, what are you interested in? How do I help you develop habits that I think are going to serve you,
Right.
like discipline and hard work and sticking with something,
Right.
even when you don't want to practice piano?
Right.
I was going to say not a live case study, but absolutely a live case
Right.
study.
Right.
Flashing back about 4 hours right now. And also, how do I help you navigate what is the world? What do we know about the world right now, of how your teachers are going to perceive certain
Hmm.
behaviors, how
Yes.
other kids on the playground are going to perceive certain behaviors,
Yep.
because that is reality.
Yep.
So even if we want to and continue to try to change reality and influence
Hmm.
all of those systemic patterns and biases that people might have, how do I help you develop the awareness of it so you can choose,
Hmm. Right.
right? That if you, again, hypothetically,
Hmm.
pick someone as a way of trying to communicate frustration, there are
Right.
consequences.
Right. Yep.
This is how the world
Works.
works.
Yes.
I might advise you not to do that. We can brainstorm and strategize different ways of expressing that frustration, maybe
Hmm.
verbally, maybe
Yeah.
engaging other stakeholders,
Right.
like others.
It's right.
And it's such a funny balance, particularly at this first grade level, of the rule or the process that the system wants you to follow is to tell a teacher,
Right.
to defer to a higher authority.
Mm.
versus preserve maybe your own agency and
Yes.
develop how do I address this with the other person?
Yes.
And I'm keeping an eye on that because there
Mm.
is also at what level of prefrontal cortex development is
My
this other person at this
Precisely.
point in time?
Very little, smaller than a pea.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, doctor. So it may not I would have different advice for you if you were in your 20s or 30s in the workplace.
Right.
And a different skill set. So there is where are you in your own development? What is age appropriate, but not just age appropriate, because age is one of the boxes and
Right.
labels as
Mhm.
your daughters
Mhm.
are reading.
Yep.
And how does that so who are you? Where are you on your journey? And what's the context around you? How do I help you develop awareness of the context around you?
Mhm.
Try to maintain agency for you to choose and help you see the different consequences that come with those choices
Right.
with a blanket of love around you and security.
Yes, yes, which it has to be within that. It has to be within that.
I did have a great conversation with him yesterday, though, because he
Yes.
said, Mom, we're driving home from school. Mom, do
Uh-huh.
you know any parents who do their kids' homework for them? And I said, No. And it's one of those things where, in the short term, it might make you like your parents better, right? They're not nagging you to do your homework. You don't have to do your homework, which might not be fun, but
Mhm.
it doesn't benefit you in the long run
Mhm.
because you don't learn how to do your homework. Your parent can't take the test for you. And so part of my role as a parent is to think about what's going to help you develop the skills to show up in this world. And I said, Do you know any parents who do their homework for their kids? And he went, Nope. I said, Okay, good talk.
I love that.
Because it's also I can get, and this is my own awareness of myself, I can get like,
Mhm.
let's go deep, and I gotta pack the life
Right, right,
lessons
right,
right
right.
now in case you're listening. And he's like, oh, garbage truck.
Right, right, right.
So how do I meet him where he's
Little.
at
Yes, yes.
and just keep
Pouring it in.
inputting, pouring
Mhm.
in and molding and shaping and
Mhm.
um a big shift that has been helpful again is taking everything as a learning experience. I think what is my own trauma from the past?
Mhm.
What am I navigating now?
Mhm.
So when I was on the phone with the principal
Mhm.
every day for multiple weeks last year, thank you,
Mhm.
kindergarten, I noticed, I didn't even know who my principal was in kindergarten. I didn't know what their office looked. I again, that was that golden
Right,
child.
right,
I never so my heart rate goes up just seeing the principal's name
right.
on the app from school now. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble.
Yes, yes.
I'm in trouble
Mm.
versus who is this principal? What is their philosophy and approach?
Right,
How can I partner with you? You are
right,
not the enemy.
right.
You have perspective and data and experience.
Mhm.
And how do I work with you rather than I just shut down because I feel like I'm in trouble or I'm not being a good parent, right?
Right.
This is all part of the learning journey. And the principal was right of he so far, knock wood, is
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
That there's a big jump in emotional maturity between kindergarten and first grade.
Yes.
It's not just him, it was
Right.
all five of the boys who were building on each other.
Right.
We'll have conversations of, do you know what that word means? Oh, you don't? Here's what it means.
Right.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. So that's how it's going.
Oh, yes.
More
I
in
hear
20
you.
years.
Yeah, right, right. More 20 years. No, I love it, and I appreciate your candor. I'm going back as you're talking. I'm thinking back, but I think it's so important for moms as you're listening to this conversation, which I'm just enjoying and really appreciative of you being part of it with me. One of the things that we as moms need to be aware of is that even if we have those past experiences that we've had that may have been whether traumatic or not positive, and we're in the present with our young
Mhm,
person, that the things that you might fumble over, those are not failures, those are
mhm,
opportunities to actually model
mhm,
for your young son, daughter, how to deal with fumbles. And I also loved how you were saying it's your mindset. Are you going to go into this?
Mm.
You're not being or doing exactly how it is I expect you to, i.e., be mini me,
Mhm.
or whatever it is that you've concocted in your mind, but to embrace who you have as a
Mhm.
unique individual, that you are in a wonderful seat to witness and be part
Mhm.
of their journey of discovery and stuff. So I appreciate you sharing about that. I can't believe our time has flown by. It's never long enough. But hopefully, we'll be able to resume our conversation in another iteration at some point in time in the future. I have some other questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. The quick thing I want to ask you is, if your past self would listen to your future self coming back to the future to give yourself some advice,
Mhm.
um, what advice would you give yourself?
I would encourage my past self to believe that I had something to offer much earlier, because I think that was in my orientation of serving other people, of making sure everyone else had what they needed, uh, making their lives easier, lost a sense that I could have something to offer, that my worth and value doesn't come from how I can show up for other people, but comes from simply being me
Me.
as a
Yes.
human being,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that we each are worthy of respect and dignity and rest and love just by nature of being human, not because we have to earn it or prove it. And that would have let me bet on myself earlier.
Mm.
That I'm guessing would have helped me draw a line in the sand of
Yes.
what is not okay
Mm-hmm.
earlier
Mm-hmm.
and not feel badly about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would couple that with, I think we each get there in our own time. And by there, I don't mean a what life looks like, but in that
Right.
understanding of we are worthy, worthwhile as we are. And there's a unique journey we're each on in order to get to that realization that often takes much longer than we would hope, but that every part of that journey can be and is valuable. So to also trust the timing that is right for you, right? Because I think there can be a I don't feel like I wasted years.
Right.
I am really grateful that I am where I am, and it feels like there's plenty of time ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I am trusting that every part of my story and journey allows me to show up more effectively in different ways going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I do wish that someone had told me earlier on, you have a lot to offer, not because of the roles that you're playing or who you're trying to be, but because of who you are.
Mm. No, I hear you. I hear you. I'm taking that to heart too, personally.
Mm-hmm.
And
This is an
I
intervention
don't
for you,
know.
Dr. Deering. You have a lot to offer in case I need
Right.
to be more direct. Thank you for being you.
I'm receiving that. Oh gosh. Yeah, we are out of time. Is there anything coming down the pike for you that you're able to share with our listeners that we can know about and I can put in the show notes is coming up?
There are more translations of Unlearning Silence coming out, which is, again, mind boggling to me. So, the Portuguese translation for anyone who reads and speaks Portuguese is coming out in 2 weeks. The German edition is coming out in a couple of months.
Hey.
I just approved the Thai translation cover. So, if English is not your first language, the ideas, stories, frameworks, and strategies will be available in different languages soon. And
That's awesome.
mostly would just love to connect with folks wherever you are on your journey. So please do connect or follow on LinkedIn. And if you want a drip feed,
Uh-huh.
Monthly, I write a newsletter straight to your inbox where your manager or your kid cannot
Oh,
see it in
okay.
case that is useful in supporting your own journey.
Oh, that's awesome. I will have that information. You can find her at Elaine Lynn Herring, Hering, on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Uh, Also, same name on Instagram and on your website. I'll have all that information in the show notes. I am really, really thankful to have been able to spend time with you. As I said, I hope for more conversations in the future. For those of you who are seeing the video, Unlearning Silence, it's a must read as a mom, as a person, as a woman, as a human being. Really read it. I think it's a brilliant book, not just in the content, but also you approach it from not just anecdotal, but research. And I'm big on research, especially the kinds of research. It's like I'm a mathy. It's like, oh, she uses numbers properly. So definitely get your copy. If you get the audiobook version, her voice is soothing. I was just telling her that before we got on the air. So definitely go get it. I will have the link to it on in the show notes. Elaine, thank you again for joining us. Moms, be encouraged as a human being, as a woman, and as a mom to your daughter and or sons. And since we're about daughters here, since if they choose to be moms later on, they're going to be raising future sons. So just know that wherever your relationship is with your daughter, healthy mother daughter relationships are possible. They just take one curative connection at a time, right? I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye. You've been listening to Mother Daughter Connections with me, your host and mother daughter relationship personal trainer, Dr. Michelle Deering. Thanks so much for joining me today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Share this episode with a friend so they don't miss an episode. And download the resource in the show notes. Until next time, remember to pause to consider how you can connect intentionally so you can improve relationally with your daughter.